Faisal Abdul Rauf speaking there. Well, thousands of people have marched against the construction of that proposed Islamic community centre.
And to put this fierce debate into perspective, Professor Jack Miles is joining us. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and religious expert. He's visiting Australia for the US Study Centre, and he's in our Sydney studio. Jack Miles, thanks for your time this morning.
It's a pleasure.
What does this, as I said, very fierce and very polarising debate say about the state of American society at the moment?
What it says is that the Republican Party is anxious to drive a wedge between President Barack Obama and the electorate on the eve of the November congressional elections, and they have chosen to make the so-called Ground Zero Mosque the Webb issue to assist them in further propagating the lies that they planted during the presidential campaign, that the president himself is an illegal Muslim immigrant collaborating with Islamic terrorists around the world. That may strike you as an incredible charge, but by dint of very continuous promotion, they have solidified that belief in about half of the Republican Party, which is, of course, about a fifth to a quarter of all American voters.
We'll get back to that particular issue just in a moment, but hasn't Jack Miles, Barack Obama also been guilty in fueling some of this debate over the planned Islamic Centre by, at one stage, questioning the wisdom of locating it so close to Ground Zero?
The issue had become quite controversial after being quite uncontroversial for quite a while. Before he engaged it, initially he, at an iftar dinner at the White House, said that, of course, Muslims had the same rights as all other Americans to build a house of worship in any appropriate location. The next day he said that he didn't mean to preempt the decision that would be taken by New York. Technically, he wasn't in contradiction to his earlier statement, but it sounded like an equivocation, and in fact it was a bit of a political blunder on his part. He could easily have deferred to Mayor Michael Bloomberg of New York, who is a Republican, who is a Jew, and who happens warmly to back the construction of the Islamic Center.
Well, what should Barack Obama be doing now to try to ease some of the tensions created by this controversy?
What he should do, I think, is not to so much directly address the charge, with this sensational charge. I brought in this tabloid image to show you how it is being flogged in conservative press, but rather should locate it in the long history of temporary American insanity turned against, for example, Japanese Americans at the time of the internment, German Americans in World War I, Jews during the time of the Cold War, McCarthyism, and earlier Catholics when they were thought to be all slaves of the Pope, subverting democracy in the United States. By locating this and reminding Americans that on every previous occasion they overcame their prejudice, he can align himself with the majority of the population from which the Republicans are attempting to separate him.
It comes at a particularly perilous political time, though, for the president, just a month or two away from the critical midterm elections where all the polls are suggesting the Democrats will get trounced. Do you believe, therefore, that Barack Obama is sacrificing principle to play politics?
I certainly wouldn't go that far. I mean, he has reasserted the principle. He just hasn't done it at the length and with the brilliance that he did at the time when he was attacked as a frothing at the mouth black racist during the presidential campaign. On that occasion, he gave a long, well-pondered, really game-changing speech on racial justice in America. The current moment calls for such a speech on the subject of religious tolerance in America. And I still think there is time for him to rise to that occasion. Of course, the election is being determined really largely on economic matters, and there is still fear on the part of the Republicans that the Bush tax cuts will be discontinued and that financial regulation may proceed because of suspicions of Wall Street that are still alive in the electorate. So economic matters don't particularly work perfectly for either side, but they're working better now for the Republicans. The religious issue could work well for the Democrats if they seize it in the best way.
As we all know, Barack Obama was elected to office as this national unifying figure. Do you believe many Americans are disappointed he hasn't lived up to his potential on that front, particularly in the terms of this particular debate?
No, I don't think that most Americans blame Obama for the divisiveness of the present moment. I believe many Americans regret the polarization, but I don't think that the controversy at the Ground Zero Mosque is blamed particularly on Barack Obama. It is blamed, I would guess, by the general population on something like extremists on both sides. The feeling toward Obama, rather than one of blame, is one of disappointed expectation. We would have liked to hear more. Not that what we heard was inappropriate, not that the president started this fight in the slightest, but that there is an occasion waiting for presidential eloquence, and we're still waiting.
Well, short of holding up his birth certificate to a national audience, what can the president do to prove to those 20% of Americans that A, he was born in the United States, and B, he's not a Muslim?
It really isn't necessary to dignify a clear falsehood with a refutation. He could perhaps point out that if there was any truth to these allegations, the Republicans would long since have brought a motion of impeachment, and for that matter, the Democrats would as well. It's the fact that no one has brought a motion of impeachment is the best refutation of all of this claim. Beyond that point, what he needs to do is resituate this charge in the history of American propaganda and American prejudice, not in the matter of the legality of his presence on American soil.
You spoke just briefly of the importance of President Obama making a speech to unify the country, to ease the tensions over this proposed cultural centre. Of course, as you know, George W. Bush made a very famous speech in the days after September 11, calling on Americans not to take issue with Islam and Muslims. Do you believe there's now a role for George W. Bush to emerge from the leafy suburbs of Dallas, Texas, and re-enter the national stage to try to play his role in quelling this issue?
There is a very obvious role for the former president to do exactly what you suggest. But if he does that, then he will be doing what the Republicans have been attempting to lure President Obama into doing, and that is speaking out on behalf of Muslims. The goal in creating this inducement for the president to speak is that then it will become possible to point at him and say, you see, he's a Muslim sympathizer, and believe you me, he's really secretly a practicing Muslim. So the Republican strategy is foiled if President Bush stands up and does that, and because he is a loyal Republican, I'm counting on him, or I'm expecting him, sadly, not to do that. I will tell you that his silence is becoming increasingly audible in the United States. It has definitely been noticed, and so has the silence of other prominent Republicans who could easily step up at this point and try to do what is called for to bring the country together again, and still this very discrediting and embarrassing wave of generalized anti-Muslim sentiment. Muslims tell me, American Muslims, that they feel more endangered now in the United States than they did immediately after 9/11, and that's a tragedy.
Jack Miles, I appreciate your insights this morning. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.